And here we go. We have a winner. Yes. All right, finally.
We have a winner.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Fourth Friday. I'm Dwayne Davison on behalf of the Valparaiso International Center, the VIC. Thank you for coming to a presentation about Guatemala tonight. If it's your first time, welcome. If it's your 100th time, you know the drill. We're going to have a nice presentation, PowerPoint. We've got a display over there. We've got binders from previous presentations, over 65 different countries over the years. Guatemala is a new one for us, so we can add to the list. And that is always nice to have a new one. But we do have a display over there, which is courtesy of Veronica Hagen, who is Guatemalan, and she's married to our board member, Kevin Hagen. And wouldn't you know, we're presenting on Guatemala, and they are not here. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Oh.
Well, they are on vacation. Yeah, that's not acceptable. So when you, the only one that would have been acceptable were they to be in Guatemala, and they aren't. So this is an unexcused absence, Kevin and Veronica. So we will have this videotaped, and it will be up in a couple of days. Kevin actually puts that up, so when he gets back, he'll do that. The last 3 years of our presentations have been recorded. Prior to that, for many, many years, we had our Valparaiso International Center on Lincoln Way, and no longer there. It's a four-story parking garage for your convenience. So, yes. So anyway, those were not recorded, but everything since Trinity Lutheran Church was nice enough to invite us into their space has been recorded, and that's starting from Ukraine, January of many years ago, 3 years ago, up to Guatemala today. Another housekeeping note, we will not have a Fourth Friday until January, and that's because next month, November, Fourth Friday is the day after Thanksgiving, and you can come and present on your Thanksgiving Day if you like. Yeah? Okay, here we go.
Present on the Cubs.
We've never presented in December, but November, sometimes it falls like this, so we will see in January. But anyway, so World Cultural Festival is in the books for next year, September the 20th, Sunday, September 20th, and food, dance, music, art from around the world. If you have not been or you're new to the organization, please go to valpovic.org. Look at our webpage there. We're on social media, and you can also get on our email list through the website as well. Our email is info@valpovic.org. So there you have it. Thanks to Jerry and Rocky and Kieran for doing some sound and video in Kevin's absence. And anyway, let's get on with things here. Lastly, we will be eating after, for those of you who are new, after the presentation is over, a little bit after 8:30. We'll be socializing and eating very authentic Guatemalan food. So Pedro Portillo, he is here presenting for us, and his parents are here, which is awesome. Pedro produces YouTube videos that talk about the immigration experience, both in general and for him. He's first generation. And we're happy he's here, not only presenting for us tonight, but just happy to have him here in our country, and to his parents as well. And you'll meet them a little bit later. So lastly, if you can, hold off on questions, which I'll moderate at the end of the presentation. And if you could, please welcome Pedro Portillo.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Can you hear me? We had okay, perfect. All right. Well, as Dwayne said, my name is Pedro Portillo, like Pedro Pascal, but not as good looking, unfortunately. So, ladies, I'm sorry. So today we're going to talk about one of the countries of my origin, Guatemala, or as it's called, the country of the eternal spring, el país de la eterna primavera, because of its weather. Just a little quick thing about me. I'm actually a Chicagoan, through and through. I was born in Chicago. I'm a traveler. That's actually a photo of me when I went with my old man to Ireland. So love that. Trilingual, I speak English, Spanish, and Italian. Don't ask me how I learned Italian, it just happened. As Dwayne said, I'm a YouTuber. I actually create videos on immigrant communities in certain cities in the US. So for example, my first video was about the Honduran community in New Orleans. My second video was about the Arab community in Dearborn, Michigan. And about 6 months ago, I finished a video of the Polish community in Chicago. Now I'm working on the Mexican community in Chicago. So sticking with my hometown. Mom hates this, but I'm also a gamer. All right, love video games. That's never going to change. But as a little kid, growing up, we were working class. My parents gave me what they could because they worked hard. One of the best memories of my life was when I was 3 years old. My dad bought me my Super Nintendo, and with that, I learned kind of how to explore through games. And that grew with me. And as I told my dad, that's why I'm curious. That's why we were here in Ireland, because the Super Nintendo taught me. So thanks, Dad. Dwayne told me to talk just briefly about this. I also work for Social Security, so I'm a federal worker, and right now, yeah, exactly. Right now, federal workers are going through a little bit. So with the shutdown, we're furloughed. We still work, but a lot of people ask, hey, what can I do to help out? Really, if you have to deal with Social Security or any other federal agency, just be nice, just know you're gonna wait. And if you're understanding it, that really does go a long way, especially when people understand that we're just the worker bees. And thankfully, a lot of claimants have been like, hey, we get it. We're just rooting for you. If you're like that, thank you. That goes a long way. And finally, I love Guatemala and El Salvador, because that's where I'm from. But that might be a presentation for another day. Hint, hint. Okay, so to get started, just a little bit of my family history in Guatemala, because you might ask, okay, so why is this Chicagoan guy talking about Guatemala then? Well, my mom's from Guatemala. She was born in a city called Huehuetenango in Guatemala. My family is on the left side is my grandpa, and the right side is my grandpa and sister, uncle, 2 uncles, and cousins. I still have cousins in Guatemala to this day. Both my siblings actually grew up in Guatemala. I'm actually, out of the 3, the one who was born in the US in Chicago. But, and that's my brother. I asked my brother to have a goatee. It's like, I had to bring him to school because of a school presentation thing. I'm like, oh, okay. Okay. However, when I was a little kid, my childhood revolved around Guatemala. Because from 93 until 2008, we always went as a family to Guatemala and El Salvador, but Guatemala to spend time either a Christmas in Guatemala and a New Year's in El Salvador, or a Christmas in El Salvador and a New Year's in Guatemala, because they border each other. And as you can see, that's me when I was 3 or 4 at a beach. I'm missing a sandal. My mom told me, I always have to keep an eye on you because you always grabbed lizards in Guatemala. And I'm like, what? Like, yep. And to your right is me with my cousins in Guatemala, because nothing beats Guatemala in Christmas or New Year's when fireworks are going all over the place. And I mean fireworks, no offense to Indiana, but not these fireworks, like real fireworks. Fireworks that my parents were like, you better be careful with that. That's not a firework, that's a stick of dynamite. But as you can see, though, we were responsible. We're just having a little what we call estrellitas. Those were safe for kids, so no worries. My parents took care of me. Unfortunately, during 2008, obviously what happens, the recession, and like many families, we were hit and we could no longer afford these trips to Guatemala. And that stunk as a kid, because I always look forward to those. But once the economy got a little better, then college and life and adulthood finally hit me, so couldn't go to Guatemala as much. But finally, in 2021, I was able to go back. And these are photos of myself with my mom in Antigua, Guatemala, which we will talk about on the tourism section of this presentation. But a little geography just to get this ball rolling. So geography, where's Guatemala located? Guatemala is in Central America, below Mexico, borders Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. The landscape ranges from mountainous highlands to flat plains to jungle and tropical areas, though those are more on the beach side. To start with a little history, when you think of like ancient Guatemala history, you think of like the Maya or the Mayan civilization, which ranged from 2000 BC to 900 AD. Now, to be fair, the Mayan Empire did stretch from southern Mexico to parts of Honduras and parts of El Salvador, but they basically encompassed all of what we think of Guatemala today. That's why, even though there were some Mayans in Mexico, when you think of Mayans, more of Guatemala. Besides, Mexico, come on, give us the Mayans. When it came to Mayan accomplishments, because the Mayan Empire was an empire, it lasted for almost 3,000 years, they independently discovered the concept of zero, which made them very proficient in mathematics and astronomy. Not astrology, I always get those two confused, so astronomy. And they developed a language in hieroglyphics, not too dissimilar than, like, for example, ancient Egypt. Obviously different, but the whole hieroglyphics form ideas is kind of similar. However, when it comes to the astronomy part, the reason that, to me, that's important is because they were actually able to predict eclipses. They were very, very adept at that. And the reason I bring that up is mainly because of this movie. So if anyone remembers, I certainly do when I was a kid, Apocalypto came out back in 2006, directed by Mel Gibson, which, but yeah. But it's supposed to be one of the Hollywood movies that represent, like, it's supposed to represent the Mayan. It's a good movie, but the history is not that great, mainly because the movie really doesn't know whether it wants to represent Mayan history or Aztec history. And you don't have to be an archaeologist to realize that these two people are different, have different cultures. It's Aztec is Aztec, Mayan is Mayan, and the movie kind of mixed those up in a jumbled mess. But the scene that really takes me away is when, in the movie, they're doing human sacrifice, which, yes, did happen, but not to the extent the movie says it did. And all of a sudden, there's an eclipse. And the people on the movie kind of freak out. Like, they think it's like gods that are punishing them or whatever. But then the, like, priest or leader tells them, don't worry, the God is going to give us back our son. The son comes back, the people celebrate, and are here. Great scene, but that would not happen in real life. The Mayans knew about eclipses. They would not have freaked out. They were very adept at astronomy. Like, there is actual proof of that. So again, if you're gonna, I do recommend the movie. It's not offensive, but it again, good movie, bad history. Just know there's a lot of liberties taking place there. But all right, so what happened to the Mayans, though? If Hollywood doesn't tell us the truth, wow, what happened, right? Well, it's the reality is some archaeologists still don't know what specific thing happened, but it's theorized that there were many factors, things like environmental degradation, overpopulation, maybe a drought, deforestation, internal warfare, basically means political strife, or disease. One thing that people might forget, kind of like, I think of it kind of like the Roman Empire. When it collapsed, it was really because of a lot of political mismanagement. And the one theory that does stick is, well, it was an empire. There was probably a lot of internal warfare within. Because again, this empire lasted almost 3,000 BC to around 900 AD. But while there are great theories, there aren't concrete, or at least not yet. And of course, if you guys have seen the History Channel, those programs of conspiracy theory, the funny one is when they think that, not just the Mayans, but any native indigenous people, if you don't know how they disappeared, they're like, it was aliens. They're like, no, it wasn't aliens. It's fun, though. It's funny, but, you know. But even though the Mayan Empire did collapse in around 900 AD, that doesn't mean that Mayan villages didn't exist. In fact, they did. And in those Mayan villages, one of the national heroes of Guatemala is an indigenous general called Tecumumang. Now, Tecungumang was, again, a leader of his village, and he actually did fight against the Spaniards in a battle in 1524. And he actually fought against one, if the legend is to be believed, he fought against one of Hernan Cortez's generals called Pedro Alvarado, because of course he had to have my name. Now, the legend goes that Tecungumang went into battle against Pedro Alvarado's forces with his people, and that Tecungumang was able to slay Pedro's horse and knock Pedro off of it, but when Pedro got up, he was able to put his lance on Tecungumang's chest, and he killed him. And when he did, that's when he became the symbol of liberty, resistance, and things of that, and liberty, resistance, things of that nature. And however, there is another account that actually comes from letters that Pedro Alvarado sent to Hernan Cortez. It was actually one of his subordinates that killed Tecungumang. So which one you believe? Neither can be proven, and that's why it's called the legend of Tecungumang. We know Tecungumang existed. We know they were probably most likely in the same battle. Did they battle each other? No, or yes. But still, the legend is kind of what has surpassed, and people, not that people don't care, but it's a legend for a reason. And within this legend, it says that when Tecungumang was slain, that the national bird of Guatemala, el quetzal, landed on his chest. Because of that, the chest of the quetzal is red. All right? Again, so the legend, and the quetzal, the bird, is the national bird of Guatemala. In fact, you can see it on the flag that it's part of the escudo, as we say in Spanish, along with the date September 15th, you can't see it, but September 15th, 1821, that's when Guatemala and other Central American countries got their independence. And the quetzal, one thing about the quetzal is that if you have gone to a zoo, you probably haven't seen one. That's because a quetzal cannot live in captivity. It actually will die. And you can make the cage as big as you want, and people have tried, but it will die. So that's why the quetzal is the national bird of Guatemala, because it resembles resilience, liberty, freedom, plus with the legends in Mayan history and Mayan culture, it's also very important to the Mayan people. And of course, the currency is named after the bird, los quetzales. It ranges from like 5, 20, 10, 1, 10, 50, and 200. There used to be a 50-cent bill, which aesthetically I think is the coolest of all of them, but unfortunately it's no longer in circulation, which to me stinks because I love that the person who's represented in the 50-cent bill is Tecungumang, but unfortunately it's no longer in circulation. I'm just like, oh, come on, at least put Tecungumang on the $50 bill. Like, I don't even know who the other people are. Okay, I do. They're presidents and teachers and philosophers. But I'm like, we can replace one. It's kind of like the Andrew Jackson bill here. It's like, come on, put Harriet Tubman there instead. So, before we move on, just a little fun fact. So if you've ever seen Star Wars, Star Wars Return of the Jedi, Endor is Guatemala. So you see where the Ewoks in the battle, know that Endor is supposed to be Guatemala. That's actually the Tikal ruins in Guatemala. So you have a lot of Star Wars fans going to Tikal, which we'll talk about in a minute, go to this precise place to just take that photo. Just because it's like, I've been in Endor, Guatemala. All right, so Guatemala independence. As I said before, Guatemala gained its independence on September 15th, 1821, along with other Central American countries. The good news is that there wasn't a war against Spain, unlike other countries. The bad news is that we were quickly annexed by the first Mexican Empire. However, the Mexican Empire also just was fighting for its independence against Spain. So what happened was that empire was pretty weak, and it only lasted 2 years. The monarchies basically were dethroned afterwards. So what happened after that? Well, from 1823 to 1841, they formed a basically a country, the Federal Republic of Central America. Think of it as if Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica made their own country. That lasted longer, almost 20 years, but at the end, they all obviously they broke apart. But I still think to myself, man, I would love to live in a timeline where they were still like all one country, just to see how that would look like. So now we enter a little bit of the more serious parts of the history of Guatemala. Don't worry, we'll get to we'll get to happier times in a minute, but I think it's just as important to know about the not so fun times as it is to the fun times. So the United Fruit Company, the American company, very shady. So in 1901, yeah, some of you already know. So in 1901, they entered not just Guatemala, but many other Central American countries. They owned a monopoly on the fruit trade in Guatemala. But not just that, they controlled railroads, railways. They tried to buy land very cheap from the peasants, and if they would just flat out steal it. They bribed police, they bribed politicians. They would pay very low wages or no wages at all. They would give you they would create cities where they would give you vouchers so you could only buy things in their stores. That's it. And if you tried to unionize, if you tried to strike, they would put you down hard. They ruled the fruit company as a monopoly for basically a little over 70 years. But eventually people obviously get tired of unfair practices and unfair laws. So in 1954, there was a democratically elected president, Jacobo Arbenz. All right, he was democratically elected in 1951. And he tried to create laws that would give the peasants back their land. But not only that, he would say, look, we'll give you back their land, but you know what, United Fruit Company will compensate you, okay? But United Fruit Company was not having any of that. They didn't want the money, they wanted the land. Why? Because they wanted to squeeze as much money out of it. So what the United Fruit Company did was they went to Washington and told the politicians that Jacobo Arbenz was a communist and that his practices were socialist and communist. We got to do something for the Guatemalan people, even though he was democratically elected. So the United States, with the help of the CIA, started a campaign of propaganda and military intimidation to basically get rid of Jacobo Arbenz, which unfortunately was successful. Through propaganda and again the use of military intimidation, Jacobo Arbenz resigned in 1954, and in his place was Carlos Castillo Armas, who was a dictator. Basically, he reversed every law that Jacobo Arbenz created for the peasants, gave the land back to United Fruit Company, dismantled any democratic institution, and unfortunately, with his coup in 1954, it started 36. It would soon start 36 years of civil war. So the Guatemalan Civil War itself is a topic that I could probably spend all day here, but I'll try to keep it short. So the Guatemalan Civil War was basically the Guatemalan army against various leftist guerrilla militias. The Guatemalan army backed by the U.S. and any militia backed by Soviet Union through Cuba. The Red Scare obviously played a big part in this this part of Guatemalan history, and it was a proxy war. And it wasn't just Guatemala. My dad's from El Salvador, and they were doing the same thing there. So not to mention other Latin American countries like Chile, Argentina. Like the U.S. was all over the place, and not for good reasons. And unfortunately, one of the communities that was affected the most during the Salvadorian War, especially between 1981 and 1983, were the indigenous Mayan people. The reason for this is that the military saw them as being more sympathetic to leftist militias, and that was all the excuse they needed to commit what they call the Guatemalan genocide or the silent genocide. The reason it's called the silent genocide is because it is estimated that about 200,000 people were killed throughout the entirety of the Guatemalan Civil War, 166 of them were Mayan or indigenous. And it's called the silent because no one knew up until recently, actually, or no one knew the extent of this killing of the indigenous people up until, like, I believe 2011, 2012, where WikiLeaks, remember that, and Julian Assange actually exposed this. And it was kind of a big deal. In fact, at the time, even Hillary Clinton, when this was exposed, had to go out and apologize for the CIA and the US's role in this genocide. Because remember, all of this was also backed up by the US, because they took out a Democratic elected president, which started everything. So, yeah, USA, defending democracy, right? But anyway, finally, in 1996, the peace is signed. Though, really, fighting really lowered in the beginning of the 90s, especially when the Soviet Union collapsed. There were pockets of fighting, but both sides were tired. It was already 30 years of fighting by that point. So it was more negotiating. How are we going to stop this fighting? Both of us are tired, all right? So a truce and a peace was signed. Obviously, the first thing, complete and permanent ceasefire for both sides, obviously. Number two, a civilian police force, not a military one, all right? Because obviously, we can look at history why having a military police force is a really bad idea. We could probably see it today here, unfortunately. Reform the judicial system and create an actual, in accordance with international law, and create a more stable government and equitable distribution, finally, of the land and social services. So how do Guatemalan politics look today? I kind of put it in what we are used to, because Guatemalan politics and how the political system is set, it's a little similar. So they do have an executive branch, we can call it. Right now, the Guatemalan president is Bernardo Arevalo. However, in Guatemala, you can elect a president for a one term for 4 years. And that's it. They do have the equivalent of a legislative branch with, think of it as both like the House and the Senate just in one, with 160 members that serve a term of 4 years if they can get reelected. The judicial system is actually voted on with 13 members, which I actually think it's a pretty good idea. And they serve for 5 years per term. Now, one thing that's a little different in Guatemalan politics is they have an administrative branch, you could say. And the best way I can describe this is, think of like the governors in every state had a building in Washington, D.C., but they're chosen by the president, though. However, there are municipalities that the people also vote on. So, and again, think of it as like if there was another administrative building next to the constitutional building, something like that. Now, I do want to talk more about the indigenous people of Guatemala, because I don't want to portray them as victims of a brutal history in Guatemala, though they were, but they are so much more than that. So the indigenous people in Guatemala, they comprise almost 50%, 44% of the population in Guatemala, with 6.5 million people. The largest group is obviously Mayan, with about 22 distinct people, ranging from Quiche, Cachiquel, Mam, and Quechí. Now, the Xinca are another indigenous group. They're not Mayan, and they're in lower number, but they are indigenous. And then there's also a group called the Garifuna, which are indigenous mixed with African descent. One of the things we forget is that during like the 16, 17, 1800s, the slave trade was not just in the US. It was all over the Americas. It was especially in countries that are now like Brazil, Honduras, and Guatemala. So obviously with that, there was a lot of mixing within indigenous peoples, and then they have their own people, which they call the Garifuna. Now, one of the more popular indigenous and Mayan people in Guatemala is called Rigoberta Menchú. She is an indigenous rights activist, still is to this day. She grew up actually during the Guatemalan Civil War. Very dangerous time for the indigenous people there. She actually, unfortunately, because of Guatemalan government's paranoia that indigenous people would help leftist militias, she saw her two brothers and mom be kidnapped by the Guatemalan army, and eventually they were murdered, unfortunately. But this did not sway her. She kept fighting, and in 1992, she won the Nobel Peace Prize for her work in making sure that the indigenous Maya and indigenous communities really around the world, once her work became popular enough, have a voice and have representation. And recently, in 2010, she actually won the Order of the Eagle in Mexico, the Order of the Aztec in Mexico, which is the biggest honor that Mexico gives to a foreigner for their work. And I think this is important because there's a lot of fight for Mayan and indigenous recognition, even in Guatemala. Unfortunately, when it comes to not just Guatemala, but I think really any country, sometimes they're, I mean, we can see it here in the US, they're, with Native Americans, they're kind of put on the wayside, kind of ignored, when they're the ones who are doing the biggest work to make sure that the culture is alive, is present. Because if any of you go to Guatemala, other than the food, which is delicious, and we will talk about, what do you want to see? You want to see the culture. You want to see the people. You want to see what's real. And they're the ones who keep it alive. But unfortunately, sometimes, well, many times they're put by the side. And even something as simple as their clothing is not, because Guatemalan clothing, the trajes tradicionales, as we say in Spanish, they mean something. The colors are beautiful, yes, and the designs are exquisite, but mean something. For example, what village are they from? Marital status. Are you the chief of the village? And unfortunately, up until recently, that was not respected, because many fashionistas would take these designs without permission and just slap them on their, I don't know, Victoria's Secret or the Louis Vuitton or what have you. And that, unfortunately, you know, that happened. And eventually, in I believe 2016 or 17, a group of Maya weavers sued and said, listen, it's not about us getting paid, it's about you giving us credit for this. You can't just take our stuff. And not to mention that in one of those examples, they literally took a design that was sacred to an indigenous tribe. So it's like, you can't take that from us, come on. So the good news is they won. So now, if you want to use any design that has any root in the Mayan community, especially in Guatemala, you have to ask for permission, which is a great example of what I call it, cultural appropriation. They fought back and they won. Now, religion in Guatemala. Now, Guatemala is very Catholic. There are indigenous religions and spiritual practices that actually work together with Catholicism, but it's actually very Catholic. Pope John Paul II visited Guatemala 3 times, 83, 96, and 2002. And one of the more popular, there are churches everywhere, and in Guatemala City there are some very beautiful churches that I've been to, but the most popular one is in a place in a town called Esquipulas. And the church in Esquipulas is famous for El Cristo Negro, or the Black Christ, which you don't see it from here, but he's life-size, like he's pretty big. And the Black Christ, or El Cristo Negro, is said that if you visit him, then he would bestow blessings upon you. If you're sick, pray for him to cure you. And there's always, as you see here, you can have lines like going up to an hour. I've done it one time, and I have vivid memories of me. I was a kid, so I was like, oh, do I gotta be here? But okay, now as an adult, I'm like, okay, I understand. So it's very important to both tourists to make the trek to get there and for the locals. Now, Good Friday is also huge in Guatemala. In fact, it's so important that it even rivals like the celebrations done in Spain. As you see here, that's a procession in Viernes Santo, or Good Friday. These are life-size dioramas of scenes of the Bible. And one thing that I would definitely want to point out, other than if you could see the people, is that this is huge. Tourists, locals, everybody comes over. It's everywhere in Guatemala, especially Guatemala City, but in Antigua, which we'll talk in a minute, it's where the most beautiful processions happen. These dioramas, they weigh up to 1 to 2 tons. So as you can see here, one side can have up to anywhere from 50 to 100 men or women carrying the thing just on one side. And then on the other side, another 50 to, and somehow every year they make it work. And they carry it for quite a while. My mom, as you can tell, I did a lot of research with her in this. She said that my grandpa, Alberto, Abuelo Alberto, used to carry these even up to his 70s and 80s. But when she was a little kid, because grandma was carrying the other diorama, my mom was right next to him, and she remembers that when she was too hot, she would just grab it and put it over her head. And I'm just like, oh man, I wish I was there, I could see it. Now, one of the things that is very special to me are las alfombras, or the carpets of Antigua. Now, these might look like carpets, and technically they are, but they're actually made with colored sawdust and sand, and they are very meticulously made. They are made like a week in advance, and they're very beautiful, very ornate, painstaking work, and they are literally used so that the men and women carrying the dioramas walk over them. Yes, but that's the point, though. It shows how meticulous and how seriously the Guatemalan Catholics take Good Friday. That's why it rivals celebrations in Spain. I have not seen these yet. My mom really wants me to go to Guatemala during Good Friday, but I'll make sure to enjoy these carpets specifically because, yes, they are destroyed once they walk over them. But that just shows how serious they take this. We'll talk a little bit about exports. Coffee in Guatemala. I'm pretty sure we've all had a nice cup of Guatemalan coffee. It's big business over there. But for a while, just like the United Fruit Company, just not as bad, but still pretty bad, they used to basically screw over the farmers. So eventually, fair trade coffee was made to make sure that these farmers are paid their fair share. That's why every time, if you've heard about fair trade, it's kind of what that means, to make sure that the farmers who do the painstaking work of picking up the coffee, roasting the coffee, and then sending the coffee to you are paid for their labor. Bananas, fruits, and vegetables are also still a big export, though with a very suspicious eye because of the history. Because right now it's La Chiquita, which is basically, that's just the United Fruit Company changing its name, basically. So anyone who knows the history looks at La Chiquita like, it's like, do something, because they know the history. Sugar, both raw and refined. And if you ever had cane sugar, it's delicious. And the main exporting partners are the US, El Salvador, and Honduras. And if I may, just because I'm talking about coffee, a quick shout out. Guatemalan friend of mine called Yoni, the coffee expert. We'll talk a little bit about immigration later, but I just wanted to talk about him because he's another example of Guatemalan migration and how people work hard. He actually, hard work basically has become the world's best coffee expert, in my humble opinion, not just because he's my friend. But seriously, he has won medals. He can tell you if the coffee is Yemeni, Guatemalan, Colombian just by the taste. He roasts them. People might think he's a snob. I just think he's an expert. And he has really put the name of Guatemala up there in Germany. So a big shout out to my friend Yoni. Keep up the good work, my man. But now, economy. So the economy can be sliced roughly into 3 sections. Service, tourism. Obviously, it's pretty big. Along with some commerce, like local markets, because a lot of, if you've been to, not just Guatemala, but if any of you have been to, I've been to, say, Mexico, Morocco, the local markets are always big business. And obviously, if you go to really any country, you should go to like the local or evening market, because that's where you see the locals, and that's how you get a taste of actual living. And definitely in Guatemala, if you're ever in any city, go to the local market. You'll not regret it. Finance, banks, and private telecommunication services. Industry-wise, apparel or textiles, if it, like I like to say, if it wasn't made in China, it was made in Guatemala. So look in the back of your shirt, and you'll probably see Guatemala there. Processed food and beverages and chemical products. When I say chemical products, I mean things like soap, shampoos, things like that. And of course, we talked about this a little bit of agriculture, coffee, sugar, bananas, cardamom as well. Now, talk about everyone's second favorite topic, tourism. The first favorite is food. It's always food, and we will talk about that. But tourism. So, I always get this question. Pedro, is Guatemala safe? Yes, it is. It's safe. While there are pockets of high crime, I always use this example. It's like Chicago. There are parts of Chicago where you don't go. I love Chicago. I was born there. But when I used to volunteer at the hostel, and people will ask me, where should I go or not go? I'm like, don't go to the south side. You know, there's the red line. I always tell them, once you get to White Sox Park, don't go below that. You'll be fine. Same thing with Guatemala. People will tell you, go here, don't go there. You'll be fine. And also, like word to the wise, don't bring attention to yourself. You know, you go to Guatemala, really any country, to learn and expose yourself to a different culture. So, you know, leave the jewelry, the Rolexes, all that kind of stuff at home. You don't need them. Dress plainly, you'll be fine. And of course, because they provide a lot of money, the tourist destinations are very safe. So we talked about Tikal in terms of history, and I want to talk in terms of tourism. Now, Tikal is probably the most popular destination in Guatemala for obvious reasons. It is where you find one of the most beautiful Mayan ruins. They're still standing. One of the reasons that they're still standing and in such good shape is, as I told before, the Mayan Empire collapsed in the year 900 AD, a full 500 years before the Spanish even came over. So when
on that map, what is the mileage north to south, east to west?
The mileage, well, that I'll be honest, I don't know, but I will tell you it took me 9 hours for the whole thing. Yeah, driving hours. So thanks for that question. So it's one of the reasons why I use this example. It's one of the reasons, like in Mexico City, it was like Tikal back in like BC era, but the Aztec Empire still existed when the Spanish came over. They were at war, and that city was unfortunately destroyed. Even to this day, archaeologists are finding the ruins of that Aztec Empire in Mexico City. But when the Spanish came over to Tikal, there's no one there, so no need to destroy it. So thankfully, that's why Tikal still, at least ruins still exist. Millions of people. It seems huge and intimidating. It is not. There are maps that will be given to you when you get there, so you don't get lost. But I remember I went there when I was 13, and even I didn't get lost at that age. So you'll be fine. The only thing that has changed is that I remember they used to let you climb a few temples. Now they don't. And while that stinks, it's probably for the better, because obviously it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site now, and you want to protect the temples. And now with, man, I'm gonna sound so old right now, but now with social media and kids, you know, sometimes doing not so smart things, it's probably for the best to preserve what we have in these temples. Lago Atitlan, or Lake Atitlan, another popular destination. Mainly, as they say, mainly for the vibes and the beauty. There are, as you can see, there are 3 volcanoes in Lago Atitlan. They're inactive, don't worry. But what's beautiful about Lago Atitlan is that around there are various little towns and villages, and it's very heavily populated by the indigenous people. And in some of these cities, you can only get there via water. Now, don't worry, with most of the cities that most tourists go to, they have services to take you from one place to another. One of the most popular cities is called Panajachel. Again, that's Panajachel. It's right here. And I like this photo just because it kind of encapsulates what makes these smaller villages great. There's the market that's selling you their traditional clothes. It's very heavily populated by the indigenous Maya. There are little small restaurants. There's even a tuk-tuk there if you don't want to walk. And again, when I was 13, we went there. And my vivid memory of that visit was that as soon as we got off the boat, all these little Mayan little girls came up to us just trying to sell us things. It was adorable. It was adorable. And of course, and these are actually photos from my most recent trip, Antigua, Guatemala, which translates to like old Guatemala. Now, Antigua is called that because it used to be the Spanish colonial town in Guatemala. Okay, it's also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It came to be finally back in about 1543 because after a lot of battles with the local and indigenous tribes, they were finally able to just settle in Antigua. And as you can see, the views are just, again, amazing. When you get to Antigua, you'll find a lot of history. You'll find a lot of stores with traditional Guatemalan souvenirs. And if I remember, okay, I tried to stretch it out a little bit. This is actually a video from Antigua. I tried to stretch it out a little bit, but because I filmed it like this, if I stretch it out, it gave me motion sickness, and I don't want to make you guys throw up. But I'll still put it for you. My only regret is that I didn't film that guy with his Moroccan more because he was really good. So as you could tell, this was in 2021, so people were still wearing masks. But that is just one example of just how big just one city is and one tourist spot in Antigua is. But a little funny story for you before we get to the favorite part, food, is my odyssey, as I call it. Hold up. My odyssey of the bull's testicle. Now, what is that? Okay, so I love to explore new things in any country I go to. So I looked at YouTube videos, and there's literally a YouTube video with 8 million views of this guy serving what they call ceviche de criadillas. What's criadillas? That's basically bull's testicle cocktail. And I don't know what came over me, but I remember pointing at the screen. I'm like, I'm gonna try that. So my mom and I go. My mom's very embarrassed, by the way. So we all go to Antigua and we have fun. We look, but I was on a mission to find this guy in his cart. And I did. His name is Christian. And he was very nice. He couldn't be sweeter. And I told him that I saw his video. It's got like 8 million views. I told him that I was very curious and that I wanted to try ceviche criadillas. Now, yeah, bull's testicles, ha ha ha. But the reality is in Guatemala, if we're going to look a little seriously, they're actually a delicacy. So much so that when you order one, Christian actually cuts the testicle in half. He peels the first layer because you're not supposed to eat that. It's the meat is inside. And then he only gives you half of it. He cuts it up, and then he cuts up tomatoes, onions, cilantro, puts in tomato juice, some soy sauce, some chili sauce made from scratch, mixes it all up. It doesn't look half bad. However, when I told him that I came all the way from Chicago, he was so touched that he was like, oh, thank you very much. You know, just for that, I'm going to give you the whole testicle. And I'm like, thanks. Now, the $1 million question. How was it? Actually, not bad. If you didn't tell me it was bull's testicle, I wouldn't think twice. Would I eat it again? Yes, but only if my dad shares it with me. Because the reality is they give you a big bowl of the stuff. So I was able to eat half of it. After that, I was like, all right, I'm genuinely tapped out. I did it. I tried something new tray. You know what? On to the next thing. But I don't want to make you guys think that in Guatemala, no, all right? There is some delicious, if you're not feeling adventurous, there is some delicious food. And I want to start out with, and these are actually photos, some of them from my time in Guatemala. So the first thing is like a traditional Guatemalan breakfast, which you could see you have some coffee. The bread over there, we call them conchitas. If you're Mexican or of Mexican descent, you have conchas, right? Well, these are just smaller. That's why we call them conchitas. Guatemalan breakfast is usually very simple. We got some fried eggs with queso fresco or fresh cheese, beans, refried beans with crema or our version of sour cream and refried plantains. It's delicious. Our family there is enjoying that breakfast. And yeah, that's me. Sorry, Mom. Yeah. When I was there, I also had this traditional dish called hilachas and picadillo de rábano. Now, what are hilachas? Hilachas are shredded beef. You shred the beef, and then you make a sauce. Well, everyone has their version of the specimens. It's tomato, dried peppers, and onions. You boil them, put them in a blender, you blend it, put in the spices you prefer, and then you put all that into a bowl with the shredded meat, and then you let that just boil. You don't put too much specimen on seasoning on the meat itself, because the point is for the sauce to kind of be absorbed by the meat. And traditionally, or at least the way my mom makes it, you do it with potatoes as well. Some people like green beans, but personally I like potatoes. It's absolutely delicious. And the picadillo de rábano is cut up radishes with some tomato, some cilantro, lime juice, and salt. Of course, you can't miss the rice. Rice is a staple in a lot of, not just Latin American cuisine, but Asian cuisine, Arabic cuisine, African cuisine. So you can't miss the rice. And those hands are my grandma. She's putting in some tortillas, because of course, can't miss those either. I don't think I exaggerate when I say I don't think there was a king or president that was eating better than I was that day. That was absolutely delicious. Like many Latin American countries, we have our own tamal or tamales. Our tamales are, if are familiar more with like the Mexican tamales or traditional Mexican tamales, ours are a bit thicker. They are made with cooked cornmeal. One of the big differences, because the sauces can come in, and the sauce you put in the tamal, again, depends on how people like to make it. But one thing that makes a Guatemalan tamal is we enroll them in banana leaves. That's the main, it preserves the flavor. And we have another version of that called paches. They are based on potatoes, actually. So rather than cornmeal, it's potatoes, and then we put in things like pork or chicken. Another Guatemalan favorite is called chuchitos. They look like tamales. They're on the left. They look like tamales, but they're as big as your fist, so they're not as big. And again, those are actually wrapped around in a corn husk, and the sauce is also on the basis of tomatoes and peppers. There's stuffed peppers, or chiles rellenos, as we call them in Spanish. And funny story, when I was creating this part of the presentation, I was getting hungry. And my mom actually came from Guatemala not too long ago, so I texted her and I said, "Hey Mom, do we still have chiles rellenos by any chance?" And she was like, "Yeah, I'll be there in 90 minutes. And there you go. Thanks, Mom. That's literally the photo. That's literally the photo. Those are stuffed peppers, rice, of course, refried beans, and crema. I ate them with tortillas, and it was absolutely delicious. Another dish is tortitas, which are, they look like hamburger patties, but you eat them with tomato sauce, and you can have beans and rice. The way you make them is you got ground beef, cut up onions, tomatoes, cilantro, put in your seasonings, put it all together, make them into a ball like meatballs, but then you actually mush them up. There's a technique that thanks to my time in Guatemala, I learned. You mush them like if you're doing pancakes, no, not pancakes, tortillas. Put them like that, put them in a pan, let them cook, and then take them out, put the tomato sauce, some rice, enjoy. And of course, I can't talk about Guatemalan cuisine without talking about pollo campero. Now, Pollo Campero is like Jollibee for the Philippines or like Popeyes for the US. It is Guatemala's fried chicken place. It's actually so popular that there are a few in Chicago and even one in New Orleans. I saw one over there because it's also very popular in many parts of Central America. And the last time I went to Guatemala, actually, the chicken was great, but those fries, man, I don't know what they cook those fries in. I think it's still beef lard, but oh man, I had to stop. I probably gained like 550 pounds just eating those fries. It was delicious. And no, unfortunately, they don't taste the same in Chicago. The chicken does, and the chicken's delicious, but those fries, man, I swear. When it comes to drinks, the beer of Guatemala is gallo. All right, which translates to rooster. That's why you have the rooster head there. It's pretty good. But my favorite drink is something called atol de lote. It is a very thick, well, not very thick, but just enough thickness and sweetness. And it's made with corn, and it's just so good. And there is a market in Guatemala called San Lucas that really makes the best atol de lote. I will go to Guatemala just for that. Talk a little bit about sports. Obviously, football, soccer is king. Guatemala's best player is called Carlos El Pescadito Ruiz, or Little Fish. The Guatemalan team, they have been that good before, but now they actually have a good chance of making it to the World Cup. So quite an adventure for them. Now, Guatemalan sports, things like basketball and baseball are popular, but when it comes to like winning medals at the Olympics, they have won in some surprising sports. The first person to win any Olympic medal for Guatemala was Eric Barondo. He actually won silver in the 20K race walk for men. He won second place. First place was both first place and third place were athletes from China. He was literally like right in the middle. And he was treated as a hero. He was the first man in the 2012 London Olympics to win it. Everybody was celebrating. But for 12 years, we didn't get another Olympic medal until last year. In men's trap shooting, we got a bronze medal thanks to Jean-Pierre Brol Cárdenas, which he fell behind an Englishman and a athlete from China, but he did win third place, and everybody was celebrating. Everybody was like, yes, at least we're happy. In Guatemala, if you win a medal, you know what, I think we're spoiled here in the US with like the Olympics and how many medals we win. When you see it in another country, they're just happy. But the next day, Adriana Ruano won the first gold medal for Guatemala in women's trap shooting. And she has a very interesting backstory because she actually started as a gymnast, but had unfortunately, a career-ending injury in her back. But my girl was like, no, I'm getting that gold medal. So she switched sports, did women's trap shooting, and she won Guatemala's first gold medal. Quite an inspiring story. Currently, there is a very famous and upcoming boxer, Lester Martinez. He had quite the fight with a Cameroonian boxer called Mbili. It was such a tough, it was like watching Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier. They actually ended up in a tie. It was pretty brutal. But he's so far undefeated, 19 wins and 1 draw. So hopefully he keeps up the good work. Talking a little bit about celebrities. You might not know that, but Oscar Isaac, he's Guatemalan. He was born in Guatemala City. If you don't know, you probably saw a recent Star Wars, he's Poe. And recently, he's Victor Frankenstein in Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein movie, which I am so excited to see. I cannot wait, because not only do I love Oscar Isaac, I love Guillermo del Toro. Like, he is one of my best directors. Like, I just love this guy. So I'm very excited to see it. And of course, I can't talk about Guatemalan celebrities without talking about Ricardo Arjona. He is not just one of the most famous Latin songwriters, or Guatemalan songwriters. He's one of the most famous songwriters, period, Latin songwriters, period. His genres range from pop to rock to pop rock. His themes in his music range from love, grief, joy, and he's really a poet at heart. And he shows that through his music. That's why he's so popular. I've been listening to him since at least 2004. So his name is Ricardo Arjona. Back when, selling CDs was a thing, like he would sell like 20 million CDs, back in the day. Now you go to Spotify, you can find them easily. And if you were here earlier, you heard some music come from the laptop. That was called marimba. Marimba is Guatemala's like national music. And the marimba has both Mayan and African roots. As I was talking earlier, the Garufano people, the mixture of Mayan and African descent, also bled into the music. And we'll put some marimba later on while we're eating and stuff. So, but marimba is very calming. It almost looks like a piano, but it's very unique. And before I conclude, I just want to talk a little bit about the Guatemalan immigration, because especially now with everything going on, I think it's important to remember that not just Guatemala, but any immigrant in here, the U.S., people don't leave their home countries because they want to. They leave because of external factors they can't control. They leave because of violence, lack of economic opportunities, and they don't come here to leech off. They come here to make a better life. Something that we forget. And in the U.S., at least 2 Guatemalans, Guatemalan American, and we always get working on farms or what have you. Guatemalans, like any immigrant community, their work just from farm workers to doctors, garbage man to a policeman, from man to here. They have really ingrained themselves in the United States and and beyond, as my friend is an example. Here in the U.S., they're mainly in California, New York, Florida, and Texas. But where I live in Chicago, there's a neighborhood called Berwyn with a pretty sizable Guatemalan community as well. And some very tasty restaurants too. So if you're ever in the area, I would definitely recommend that. And with that said, thank you all very much. That is my YouTube video, actually, with the videos that I told you about. So if you are curious about that kind of work, I'll leave that there. But thank you all very much for this opportunity. I had a lot of fun making this and had a lot of fun telling you. I hope you all. And thank you again.
Pedro, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation there, and we've got plenty of time for question and answers, but boy, that was pretty exhaustive there. We learned quite a bit. Are any of you guys VU students? No, nobody. From Knox. Oh, part of the old Spanish class.
Oh, sweet.
Can you believe that? They're still coming. That is so awesome. For years, we did something at the old house, Intercambio, where we would speak Spanish and English, all levels, natives, and Anne Marie and I were regulars, and the Spanish teacher in Knox would send his students there, and every month we'd get students from Knox. It was incredible. For years we did that. It was awesome. So welcome. Glad you guys are here. I was wondering if they were university students simply because that was as good as a paid class with tuition at a university. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I was thinking of Guatemala and food today. Went to the store, and of course the bananas said made in Guatemala. Is this a coincidence? Our coffee at the house this week and last week was Guatemala. Did you do that on purpose?
Oh. Sure.
It was, which was interesting. And when we had our full-time fair trade store at the old location, we sold a lot of shade-grown organic fair trade coffee, much of which did come from Guatemala. So anyway, go ahead and raise your hand for questions, and I'll come by with the microphone because it's going to be, on the recording. So, yes, sir.
About the laws again, is there a certain number your Congress has to get to make a law a law official?
certain number. Great question. Like I said, it kind of works similar to the U.S. It has to be over the 50% majority, basically. It kind of like a great example. Actually, you might not know this, but our Congress right now was going to vote on a bill to see if even with the shutdown, get federal workers paid. You needed 60 out of 40, and we did it. We got 54 out of 45. Kind of the same way. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. What's your name? Tony. Thanks, Tony.
How did the Mayan and Aztec folks get along, their empires? When they were
They actually got very well along. So one thing that I, for the sake of the presentation, but when I went to Guatemala in 2021, there are ruins in Guatemala City that are protected, and I was able to talk with a few of the workers there. There is pretty much strong evidence that they did trade, actually, the Aztec Empire and the Mayan Empire. So could there have been some scuffles? Sure, but there's no like huge evidence of like war. There's more evidence of actual trade within them. Like there are, I know there's a book that whose name I'm forgetting. It's basically a book that talks about all the history of the Americas before Columbus came over. But part of that book shows like trade routes that were used, and one of those is the Mayas with the Aztecs. So they got it on pretty well, and those trade routes are a pretty dead giveaway that at the very least they respected each other.
Did the Aztecs empire collapse at the same time as the Mayans?
No, the Mayans collapsed in 900 AD. The Aztecs, they collapsed when Hernán Cortés came over, when the Spanish came over, which was a full 500 years. Now, important thing about that is that the Mayan Empire did collapse, but there were still like small pockets and villages, moderately sized as well, in Guatemala. That's why some Mayans did still fight with the Spanish. But when it comes to the Mayan Empire, yeah, that was long gone by the time the Spanish came over. Thank you.
I'm curious about the climate and weather throughout the year in Guatemala.
So it depends where you go. So obviously if you go to like the beaches and tropical areas, it's awesome, it's sunny, it's hot. There is a city in Guatemala called Xela that in the morning it's pretty cold, and then it gets a little warmer during the day. It could range around like 40 in the morning and reach up to 70 during the day. But Xela is more like in the highlands, so obviously that's why it gets colder. So really, when you visit a place, you have to look at the altitude. For example, Antigua, it is in an elevated area, but it's not mountainous, so it's kind of like the perfect weather. But if you go to a place like Xela, which is a little bit more elevated, it's going to be a little chilly, so at least bring a sweater. Thank you.
Yes. I just had a question. Did when Hernando Cortez came over and anybody else like him, did any of the Mayans or Aztecs become like enslaved under his visit or under any of the other
some
people's
did.
visits, or what?
Yeah, some did. I know with the Aztecs that definitely happened. When it came to the Mayans, yes. I know this is more Aztec, but when the Spanish came to conquer the Aztec Empire, actually what a lot of people might not know is that the Spanish actually aligned themselves with other tribes that were against the indigenous tribes that were against the Aztecs. Because when I went to Mexico City, they made sure that I took a tour guide, and they made sure that we knew that. That's a little bit more complicated than we might think. But yeah, if they resisted, if they killed, they'd probably be enslaved as well. So, yeah.
Excellent presentation. I'm Sue, first time here.
Welcome.
With a mother from Guatemala and a father from El Salvador,
Yep.
Can you share like your view of the differences between the two cultures?
Yes, there's both a lot of it's 50-50 because they're both Central American countries. There is a lot of similarities, but also differences. I guess the differences first would be food, because usually when I say El Salvador, and people know just a little bit about El Salvador, they're immediately like, oh, pupusas. Yeah, pupusas. When I say Guatemala, it's more like, oh, Mayan. Yeah, Mayan. So it's kind of like the differences are what I focused on in each country were different. You know, I mean, I talked about Guatemalan food, but I bet a lot of people didn't know much about Guatemalan food other than maybe the tamales. That's not to say that it's good or bad. It's just if you don't know, you don't know. It's not as popular. Whereas in El Salvador, the food, especially pupusas, they are very popular. So it was more like growing up, what I identified more with like El Salvador was different than Guatemala. Well, El Salvador, it was more food, honestly. For Guatemala, it was more like the indigenous identity because it was Mayan.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
First, I want to say this is interesting, well-organized presentation I've heard anywhere.
Oh my God, thank you.
So interesting. What picks this question up is because we have different countries around the world that need to go to the peace table. What after 36 years of civil war brought the two sides together finally?
Yeah, it's a great question. One main thing happened in the 90s that put one side at a disadvantage, the collapse of the Soviet Union, because it was really those 36 years were really a proxy war between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. The same thing actually in El Salvador. But when the Soviet Union collapsed, that put one side at a disadvantage. But really, in this situation, what really happened is people were just tired of fighting. Because by that point, even when the Soviet Union, it was over 30 years. That's why in the 90s, even though there were pockets of fighting, it was more negotiations now. It was more negotiations of, all right, how can we make a permanent ceasefire? And it took a while. It took, even from the collapse of the Soviet Union, it took another extra 5 years for both sides to finally come to an agreement on what we want and how we want it. With the looming threat of, okay, there's not a lot of big fighting, but they're still fighting, and it just takes one battle to increase into a huge war. So that put people into high alert. But in this case, it was more like people were, both the Soviet Union collapsing and people being tired of fighting. Again, a lot of people disappeared. Yeah, as they call it in Spanish, los desaparecidos. They disappeared, and to this day, they're still exhuming the bodies of those that disappeared. So you take all that together, you add all this baggage. Eventually, I would think people are going to be like that. We can't do this no more. We're going to kill each other.
Pedro, growing up, how many years did you live in Guatemala?
Altogether, probably I would say 2.5, 3. Altogether, like if we put all the time together. I did spend summers in Guatemala. I remember my mom. I had when I was little, had a procedure done over there, and I was there for basically the whole summer, almost over 100 days. And you have your cousins there, you have your family, and that one stay was like 3 months. So you add all of them together, probably like 2 to 3 years.
Right.
35.
And
Very old.
so I would like to hear some native Guatemalans speaking Spanish together. And as I understand, you don't speak an indigenous language separate from Spanish. But if you could talk with your dad, just have a 45-second conversation in Spanish
Sure.
for us.
Yeah, he's Salvadoran, but hey, I'm Guatemalan, so. Bueno.
Ok, mijo, yo lo que quiero preguntarte es si en Guatemala hubo un cambio político en toda la guerrilla que tanto la guerrilla como el gobierno ¿hubo un cambio político en Guatemala o no?
Don't worry, I'll translate this later. Bueno, se puede decir que sí, porque cuando se firmó la paz, por ejemplo, un cambio es que ya la policía, no queremos policía militar, queremos policía de ciudadanos, no militar. porque toda esa policía es como en El Salvador, la guardia era la policía, ¿verdad? Básicamente. Entonces entonces cuando se firmó la paz, sería como diciendo que ya no queremos la guardia, queremos una policía de ciudadanos. Y eso fue un cambio grande, porque eran los militares que desaparecían la gente. Sí. So basically he asked me, so when the peace was signed in 1996, was there any change politically in Guatemala? And I reminded him, well, yeah, remember that when the peace was signed, one of the requests was we don't want a military police force. We want a civilian police force. Because in El Salvador, specifically, the military was called, in English, it translates to the guard. And that's like saying, listen, we don't want the guard anymore, all right? We want a civilian police force because the guard is responsible for disappearing thousands of people. Obviously, we don't trust them. And we don't want the military in the cities. So please, no more military police force. And that was one of the biggest changes when the peace was signed.
So we had some hazing from the audience that wasn't actually authentic because it was an El Salvadorian. So here's a Guatemalan who will do the trick in Spanish.
No te preocupes. ¿Te gustó la presentación?
Sí, me gustó bastante, hijo, y te felicito y me siento muy orgullosa de ti.
Oh,
Dios te bendiga y gracias a todos los presentes que participaron en tan linda charla.
Okay.
Sí, me encantó.
I asked her if she liked it. She's like, yes, I really liked it. I'm very proud of you. And she thanks all of you for coming in and participating in the little small. Ya casi, ya casi.
I had a question. Given the militant past,
Yeah.
what is their stance on like gun control or civilians bearing arms?
Well, there are laws on gun control. Depends on the areas because, like I said, some areas are high with crime, unfortunately. Like I said, those areas are very easily avoidable if you're a tourist. They'll tell you where not to go. And those areas, unfortunately, even the police have, it's, again, a civilian force now, but even the police have a hard time trying to control those areas. And you know what those areas are like right off the bat. When it comes to the more safer areas, there's a reason why there's a big civilian police force in like Antigua and Atitlan. They make sure you're safe. And if the local ones wants a gun, they can get one, but they have to, it's regulated actually, you know. You can compare it to like some of the more better states in the US that actually need, you need a FOID card and a CCL if you want concealed carry. Over there is kind of the same thing for the areas that aren't high with crime.
In the early 1980s, I went through Guatemala, and the first thing I remember still to this day, and I was not well traveled at that point, and it was pretty shocking, was going through the airport and seeing military folks with, all of them huge armed things, not,
And this was during the Guatemalan Civil War in the 80s, so that's not surprising at all.
Yeah, it was shocking, and then now it's almost even more shocking seeing that in Chicago, but because we're not used to that, but that's what I remember from there.
What was the purpose or the significance of human sacrifices in the culture?
Short answer to that is kind of a sacrifice to the gods, basically. It wasn't done as frequently as people believe, though. Yes, it was a fact, but how often it was done has been grossly exaggerated. That's also one of my issues with the movie Apocalypto, because it sounds like one after another, where really it happened once, maybe a year. And of course, the eclipsing kills it for me, because now knowing what I know about astronomy and how the Mayans knew about astronomy, that kills it. But it was to honor the gods. Gods like, if I remember correctly, one of the sun gods, Kanikahau, was one of those gods. That was the purpose of actual human sacrifice that was done, but nowhere nearly as frequent as depicted in like movies. Not to my knowledge. If it's in some book, I didn't read that. But to my knowledge, it was adults that actually offered themselves to that. That's another thing they don't tell you is like they were, whether for good or ill, most of the human sacrifice were actually willing participants, because my best guess that they thought they would be rewarded in the afterlife for sacrificing themselves to the gods. So in real life, many of them were actually willing participants, for better or for worse.
Because there's been several children, they're basically children that were found in high altitudes, in those areas. So, just basically children that were found.
Perfect. I'm going to look that up. Thank you.
Excuse me, hold it. I'll bring the microphone to you.
I just have a question. Back in 2019, we were on a cruise and we went down to Honduras, a place called Riotan. And Riotan was basically a cruise ship city. There's no exposing to the Gulf there for Honduras, but maybe El Salvador, I don't know. But is there any kind of Guatemalan, cruise ship industry there? Has the cruise ship industry from the Pacific gone down there and had a big influence like that?
Not at the moment. If there is, it's not big enough to make a splash, really. I think it's because if you really want to, people aren't dumb. And when it comes to Guatemala, if you really want the local experience, you have to go inland. Because Atitlan, Tikal, Antigua, San Lucas, and even Guatemala City, they're more inland, and to kind of, not to say that there isn't culture on the beaches, there is, and it's very fun. And if you want that, that's great. But you're not gonna get even a bit of sense of like Guatemalan local experience.
Yeah, cruise ships don't give you much opportunity for that. They leave.
you can't explore Guatemala on a time limit. Well, obviously a week or two, but you can't explore on a time limit just like 2-3 hours. You can't do that. If you're gonna go to Antigua, a whole day. Tikal, a whole day. Lake Atitlan, 1 or 2 days, because you want to go to the cities. You want to see the scenery.
That's kind of the downfall of cruising, actually, but otherwise it's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
I just wanted to know if your national bird is endangered like our eagle is.
It used to be. Right now, it's thankfully it's making a comeback. And one of the things that helps with that is that while the bird is beautiful, it is, if you are caught like hunting it, you're dead basically. Like it is, at least in Guatemala, you will face stiff jail time. Nope, no fines, no nothing. Straight to, it's like that joke, straight to jail. I don't care. Yeah, it's a pride. Like the thing about Guatemalans, they really are protective of like their indigenous clothing, their national bird, their music, their food. So thankfully it's not, and I think it also helps the fact that the bird can't live in captivity. So why would you even? It makes no sense. It's going to die anyway. So that's why thankfully it's not endangered, and
Does it mostly live in the mountains?
Mountains, jungles as well.
Well, you said the tourist area was quite safe. But when I was in Guatemala maybe 3 years ago, I find, even the restaurants, they have people guarding with guns in front, and also the department stores. Yeah. Are they still have that?
Last time I went to Antigua, yes, yeah. And to be honest, that's probably one of the reasons why it's safe. Nobody's going to steal from you when they know that there's a guy out there with a rifle. It's like, yeah, criminals are, unless they're dumb, they're not going to do that, And I know it's intimidating, but I mean, the same thing in like a place like Florence. I was there just last month, and there are soldiers in the cathedral as well with guns. So it's to protect their tourist areas, obviously, because they provide a lot of revenue. So you're going to make sure you're going to protect your revenue as well.
In the restaurant, it's like a jewelry shop, and you understand, but restaurant and then department store.
Yeah, talk about culture shock. Thank you.
All right.
Was I have one more?
Do you see the birds when you're out? Or are they really, more secluded?
You have a good chance of seeing them in Tikal. You have a good chance of seeing them there. Yeah, and a very unique noise that they make as well.
What is the type of programs that, it sounds like to me that one of the things that across the board international that we have respect for is, there has to be a way that, food is a commodity, it's a necessity to survival. So there are international farming exchange programs and stuff like that. Are you familiar with that? And is that something, some people, USA has trading a lot, but they have these expat programs and such. I don't know if many people know this, but now there's a lot of international retirement living, and hey, if you can become go to do these work vacations or things for the students or adults.
I know where you're going with that. Yeah, so that hasn't been, I don't want to say an issue, but I've seen it been an issue in cities like Mexico City. That hasn't really been the case for Guatemala yet. There is a good respectful balance. Because obviously you want people to come over, but you want to keep it's a balancing act. You want to keep your culture. You want to keep. So at the moment that we don't have that kind of a problem. If anything, we're trying to import more as well because we want Guatemala, like politicians and people, just to know more about Guatemala and have more of these programs. And there are. I don't know what they are specifically, but there are. But in terms of have they exploded like they have in Mexico? Not yet. So right now, if you... Oh, Costa Rica's pretty big too. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. So if you're up for it and want to give Guatemala a try, hey, right now is a good time.
All right, who's hungry? Anybody? Okay, a few people, right? All right, now I was a little disappointed when I heard that Pedro only brought one type of food, but don't worry, we have 4 different varieties of bull testicles, okay? All right, everybody still hungry, or are we ready to go? So, can you explain the food we have tonight? Pedro will be over there explaining it as well, but we've got several different things from a Guatemalan bakery in Chicago, which we have been to. We went to the Guatemalan restaurant in Chicago with Kevin and Veronica as well, and I don't remember the name. What's it? Quetzal, there we go. So explain the baked goods, the pupusas, and then the hamaca drink. Oh, hi. Yes, fried plantains.
There's one there. When it comes to the sweet bread, there is one called conchitas. They're like these small little round pastries. If, like I was telling, if you know the Mexican conchas that are bigger, these are smaller. That's why we call them conchitas. There's also, we bought churrasco, right? Oh, champurrado. Yes, we also bought champurras, which are like these disc bread that's sweet. Did you guys bring coffee or no? No. Okay, but at our home, perfect. But if you can and take one or two with you afterwards and dip them in coffee, they're really good. Fried plantains as well. Didn't know we had those. They are what they sound, fried plantains. Then they're delicious. When it comes to the pupusas, so this is where kind of the Salvadorian mix comes, because it's actually, anyone who knows, it's actually Salvadoran. Still delicious though. They are like little tortillas stuffed with beans, cheese, meat, and another vegetable called loroco. And there, I can see that they are the sign there. Loroco is, think of like mini asparaguses. It's still really good, along with cheese. And then the agua de Jamaica is hibiscus water. It is very traditional and very tasty in not just Guatemala, but also other Central American countries and Mexico. Love agua Jamaica, so I definitely recommend that. And when it comes to the pupusas, you can eat it any way you want, but if you want to eat them like Central American, then you grab the pupusa, you put on top the cut up cabbage and the sauce, and you eat it with your hands. Eat it with a utensil, okay, I won't judge you. But if you want to eat it the right way, you eat it with your hands. And if your hands aren't messy with the sauce and everything, you're not doing it right. Come on, all right?
So if you're going to be eating with your hands the proper way, that means less washing for me afterwards. So use your hands, please. And we've got restrooms right to the right here if you need to wash your hands. And yeah, the food, looking forward to it. It's going to be great, I think. So as you guys know, we're going to break for food now. You're welcome to kind of approach Pedro and ask him more questions. He'll sign autographs, and it will be great. We're going to be moving kind of tables back in, chairs around, so you guys can stay and socialize for a little bit. So, yeah, it was a great presentation. Really appreciate you coming, Pedro. And thank you to Connie for introducing Pedro to me originally and for making the drink. Connie's from Mexico originally, and so she had very authentic ideas about how the food should be, and I think we're going to be good with that. So thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you guys during the socialization.